ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaskar, my dear friends. In this video, I am explaining who am I. That is a small booklet written by Acharya Sharma. So, who am I? On this topic, I am going to give you this video. In this paradoxical universe, the pursuit to discover its mysteries is limitless. The more we know, the more we humble we become in the face of what we don't and cannot know. There are innumerable ways and means for investigating and acquiring knowledge. Amongst these, there are disciplines of objective, experimentally verifiable sciences about which man naturally wants to know more and more. Why, how, where, when, of everything he keeps on wondering and inquiring about it. It is this natural curiosity which has led man to acquire so much knowledge of the mundane and material world and erect an imposing and gigantic technological edifice of civilization and culture. Human ingenuity, aided by experimental science and thought, continues pushing back the limits of the unknown. However, the mass of humanity, including the elites, knows pretty little about its own real self. We hardly ever think about knowing the reality of our own existence. If we remain ignorant about our own real identity, the course of life remains uncertain, fearful, and confused. Because of ignorance of one's real self, man is unable to think or act wisely and righteously. There is only one highway to true happiness and peace in life, and that is self knowledge. The present book is a humble attempt at exploration of the self. Words or logic cannot fully explain the riddle of who am I. The only way to know one's true identity is to explore the domains of consciousness within. An endeavor has been made in this booklet to guide the seeker to explore the reality of self through specific disciplines of meditation and contemplation. It is hoped that it will be helpful to the genuine seeker of the spirit, Pandit Sri Ram Sharma. I start with chapter number 1. Throughout life, man remains confused because of the multiplicity of his numerous personalities. His perception of his own personality is always in a state of flux. It keeps on changing with environment, events, and interactions with people, places, and things. A verse in Chanakya Niti 14 to 18 exhorts man to keep on questioning himself about his true identity. How does he identify himself from time to time? As a friend or an enemy of someone, I am friend oblique enemy of as powerful or weak in relation to others. I command, I am subdued by as a resident of some place or country I belong to, am I citizen of, as rich or poor because of plenty or lack of money and possessions. I am rich, I am poor on account of etc. The subject I in each case appears to refer to a different person. In other words, the I with which the person identifies himself refers to his body. Ultimately, the truth dawns that the real self, that is real I, the unchanging self, is not related to the material world. That, in fact, the real I is none other than an emanation, a local manifestation of the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, supreme being, the unified field of existence, and therefore is endowed with all its attributes in potential. The perceived limitations are because of our false identification with the transient ego self, which separates us from the whole. There is only one primary reason behind all our problems and sufferings. Through the magic curtain of Maya, ignorance, we have forgotten our at one ment with the ultimate supreme source. The moment we awaken to our immortal identity as sparks, souls of the supreme light, universal transcendent spirit, we are freed from the shackles of fear, death, decay, and suffering. With this realization, the entire perspective of I undergoes a metamorphosis. The seeker then reflects, when I am part of that eternal being, how can I, the eternal self, take birth or die? Not being life in a body, why should I feel the necessity of food and water for my existence at a particular place? I am also not the mind stuff which weaves personal and material relationships, making me unhappy on loss of what I am attached to, and happy when I get what I like, not being the egocentric doer. The question of bondage to material world or deliverance from it does not arise. In other words, the real I is beyond birth and death, does not feel hungry or thirsty, is free from misery and sense of pelf and possession, and is simply a witness to all activities of the mind, body, ego, not all acquisition of knowledge or information in this world is subject to our personal experience. Therefore, it is always subjective and relative to our physical body till we become aware of our true identity. Then and only then we get clear vision about our roles as embodied spiritual seekers. Therefore, awakened awareness of self or self realization is the supreme aim of human life. When you ask someone about himself, he identifies himself as a professional, a holder of some status, as a follower of some faith, etc. On further enquiry, he gives more details such as his place of residence, citizenship, lineage, or occupation. Such identifications, however, are not casual replies. The individual firmly believes in these identities as his real self. Man is so obsessed with his body that he considers the body and the real self as one and the same. As a matter of fact, heritage, race, business, profession, or status are related exclusively to the physical body of man. Body is only a garment or an instrument of the real self, but illusion and ignorance make him identify entirely with the body. Consequently, he ignorantly considers the well-being of the transient body as the well-being of the eternal self. Because of this illusion, life becomes a perpetual flux of turbulence, anxieties, and painful experiences. Soul in the body. It is true that a being independent of the body lives through a body. At the moment of death, when life departs from the body, there is no change in the apparent physiology of the body. Nevertheless, the dead body immediately starts to decay and to petrify, emitting foul smell. Devoid of life, life in its essence is an integral part of the soul till it attains salvation. The body acquires an abhorrible state. It proves that although the being enlivens the body, it has an existence of its own, independent of the body. In parlance of spirituality, this separate entity is called Atma, soul. This soul is our true identity. Your right answer to the question, who am I, is I am that Atma. The real you is not the body. Everyone intuitively knows that soul and body in a living being are two separate entities, and even in our speech we say my body, signifying that I am the possessor of the body and not the body itself. Hardly anyone will doubt the separate existence of the soul. Whereas even a common man accepts this concept of differentiation in principle, his behavior reflects otherwise. Man behaves in such a manner as though he is inseparable from his body, and the pains and pleasures of the body are his own, of the real self. A close observation of an individual's thoughts, speech, and actions would show that all of these pertain exclusively to his identification with the body. He thinks, speaks, and acts in terms of the body only. In other words, when he says I, he implies the body. Body is the lodgment and temple of the soul. Hence, it is proper as well as necessary to look after its health, cleanliness, and upkeep. But it is erroneous and fallacious to identify oneself exclusively with the body, thus mistaking the residence for the resident. It is due to this false and mistaken identity that man loses sight of the real interests of the soul, his true identity, and suffers the pangs of death, disease, separation in endless cycles of embodiments. Interests of soul and body are different. Since soul and body are two separate entities, their interests are also different. The requirements of the body are represented by the interest of the sensory organs. The 10 organs of sense perceptions and actions and the 11th mind are perpetually running outwards for gratification of their basic urges through the instrumentality of the body. The sensory urges are delicious food, stylish clothes, numerous things of beauty, beautiful women, melodious sounds, and a variety of objects of comfort, pleasure, and luxury. The mind, on the other hand, aspires for a high status in society, great wealth, widespread fame, and authority. The entire life is thus spent in satisfying these insatiable hankerings of body and mind. When desires become cravings, the deluded person frantically tries to satisfy them by any means, fair or foul. This is the primary cause of all sinful activities. Lust and greed are animal traits. If a human being exclusively and wholly lives for food, sleep, fear, sex, etc., his would be considered an animal like existence devoid of any higher purpose. The least rise in the intensity of desire or impatience makes man take recourse to unfair means and turns the individual into a reckless devil. Individuals with such devil character traits makes life hellish not only for themselves but also for others. Lust and greed are the two most powerful of these evil traits, which remain ever unsatiated. There is no end to cravings for sex and desires for acquiring more and more things for comfort, pleasure, and luxury. Life is an endless cycle of desire, temporary satisfaction, and still more intense craving. The more one indulges in sex, acquires material things, the greater become agitations of the mind, worries, wants, and anxieties, and these go on increasing day by day. Whatever pleasure one gets through sensual indulgence is followed by disenchantment, fatigue, and unhappiness. The knowledge that the present sense gratification would not last long and its ultimate and would bring unhappiness of loss creates a vicious cycle. In this way, perspective of body consciousness drags man towards immortality, suffering, cravings, and turbulence in mind. Nevertheless, man keeps on seeking true happiness in material things. Real success and prosperity in life lies in remaining ever conscious of one's true identity. When man identifies himself with Atma, soul, his aspirations and inclinations naturally begin to follow the righteous path of self-discipline, which provides true happiness to the soul. The food for soul. Whenever a person commits immoral acts like theft, violence, adultery, deception, he has a queer feeling of uneasiness within. His limbs start shaking and pulse rate becomes irregular. It is nothing but an adverse reaction of the higher self soul to an immortal act or behavior of the lower animal self. Immortality is contrary to the nature and interests of the soul. On the other hand, virtuous acts involving altruism, philanthropy, kind-heartedness, self-sacrifice, and continence provide great inner satisfaction. Light-heartedness, cheerfulness, and exhilaration. Only those persons who are able to listen to the promptings of the soul, conscience, and act accordingly are righteous and noble, having risen above animal drives. A person turns to the voice of conscience can never commit a sinful or evil act. Virtuous acts provide inner peace and joy to the soul in this world as well as in the world beyond. Thus, the well being of the soul lives in living virtuously. On the contrary, body considers its well being in subtle and gross gratification of the mind and body. Unfortunately, mass of humanity spend their entire lives in the blind routine of appeasing the urges of the body, which, unlike the soul, is destined to decay and die. But in this process, soul, bound in ignorance, keeps on accumulating sins. No doubt, such lifestyle gives fleeting pleasure to the body and to mind, but the soul is exposed to suffering in this world and in the world beyond. The body is required to the welfare of the soul unless strictly disciplined to absent from sense indulgence. The body cannot properly perform virtuous and noble acts. It is therefore required to be subjected to such disciplines as continence, sacrifice of self-interest, control of wayward thoughts, speech, actions, moderation in sex and philanthropy. It is therefore evident that well-being of body and soul are dramatically opposite. One has to choose between the two. Self-realization is reflected in behavior. There are two categories of people in this world: those who identify themselves with their body, do not care about the welfare of the soul, and spend their entire life in collecting material assets and things of comfort and pleasure. Life of such persons is reduced to an animal-like existence, even while they are discussing nobility, rectitude, religion, ethics, life beyond death, benevolence, etc. Their interest remain focused on self-aggrandizement here on earth or in heavens beyond. At times, such individuals use religiosity as a facade for acquiring fame, for public acclaim of their nobility, or for providing superiority of their scholarship, but their minds are always preoccupied with the pursuit of a physical pleasures and body centered ego inflation. But the moment a person realizes the necessity of soul awakening, there is a sea change in his attitude towards life. Sense indulgence loses charm for him. When the wisdom of self awareness dawns within, he realizes that the body is merely a garment of clay or an instrument for self-expression in the visible world, that his unique, invaluable human life should not be wasted in trivialities of self glorification and indulgence in the comforts and pleasures of the body. On becoming soul conscious, he identifies himself with Atma, soul, and all his interests are directed towards well-being and joy of the soul. He single-pointedly uses every moment of his life in cultivating soul attributes. Thus, a body engrossed person leads a miserably unhappy and animal-like existence, whereas the soul conscious person follows a life path conforming to highest ethical and spiritual standards, leading to abiding peace and joy. Rewards of soul awareness. On becoming aware of the immortal indwelling soul, one does not get unduly influenced, agitated, or disturbed by the evanescent ups and downs of life, dualities of profit and loss, life and death, union and separation, respect and insult, attachment and aversion, etc., produce very negligible reaction in a soul conscious person. He takes these as routine natural happenings of this ever changing world. The man of awakened awareness knows that even events happen as per divine will and not according to ego centered individual likes and dislikes. The enlightened person disinterestedly views the passing show of happenings like a detached spectator, neither elated by a so-called pleasant events nor dejected by unpleasant ones. A soul-conscious person easily escapes from the stresses and strains which keeps on tormenting and disturbing the body consciousness persons and at times under intense stress driving them to take the extreme steps of suicide. The key to living a life of purity, simplicity, nobility, and dignity is to rise above body consciousness and awaken to the reality of soul consciousness. It brings true happiness, peace, and gives a purpose to life. This is why spiritual masters gave topmost priority to sadhana of soul realization. I am an immortal soul. The sadhanas given in the book are meant to inspire a sincere sadhak on the path of self realization, the supreme purpose of life. The discovery of the indwelling real self makes a person realize that he is neither this body nor the mind stuff Suk- Suksma Srira, both of which are only soul's instruments. Realization of this truth frees man from the bondage of body and mind. A fable would explain this phenomenon more explicitly. A monkey happens to come across a pitcher full of nuts. It puts its hand in the pitcher, grabs a fistful but is unable to withdraw the filled fist because of the narrow mouth of the pitcher. The monkey starts crying in panic, behaving that the pitcher is believing that the pitcher is holding its hand. It is able to pull out the hand the moment it realizes the truth and releases the nuts. Likewise, man suffers because he clings to his carnal weaknesses like attachment, likes, dislikes, sex, anger, etc. The moment he exercises his conscious willpower to shake off these self-imposed addictions, he is instantly freed from the bondage of ignorance. There is also that story about the lion's cub who, on being brought up in the company of lambs, developed the timidity of lambs, but when it saw its image, the true self in water, it regained its real lion-like confidence and strength. This is exactly what happens when we discover our true identity, the immortal soul. It brings total relief from ego-inflicted sufferings and wounds which keep on tormenting us each moment. There are numerous fields of knowledge in this world, but the supreme knowledge, transcending all other fields of knowledge, is the knowledge of the self, Atma Gyan, which travels the mastery of which unravels the mystery of life. Research scholars in the material and mundane sciences have uncovered many miracles of nature, such as electrical energy and atomic power. In the same manner, on divine deep into the inmost recesses of the supreme source and spirit of the universe, the sages, seers, and the mystics have discovered the nectar of Atma soul, transcending the limitations of the material world, the experience of which makes man truly wise and bestows upon him mastery over mental and material forces and energies. Hence, it is essential for man to first know his real self. He should repeatedly put this question to himself, who am I? And find out the right answer through in depth analysis, contemplation, and introspection. On knowing the true self, man gains the clear seeing wisdom to discriminate between what is beneficial for true human well being and what is not. Things which are considered beneficial in a state of mind inclined towards materialistic pursuits and pleasures for which man craves day and night appear trivial, in fact harmful when one becomes aware of the soul. Then many pursuits which appear useless, even foolish and abhorrent to a materially infatuated individual, provide real peace and joy to the seeker of the soul and become signposts on his immortal journey back home. Hurdles in sadhana. Many persons aspire for spiritual progress but do not achieve the desired progress because of their half-hearted, lopsided process of sadhana. The goal of sadhana is to violently shake man out of his body conscious state of slumber so that he becomes fully awakened to the reality of his true identity as an immortal soul. The holistic therapy for any disease involves treatment of the root cause of the malady. Mere palliatives do not serve the purpose. The same principle holds true in case of spiritual sadhana. No doubt, the conventional rituals of sadhana like continence, philanthropy, fasting, japa, Anusthans, yajna, etc. are beneficial as initial steps. Nevertheless, they do not constitute the totality of sadhana. These rituals do enhance purity of mind, positive traits, and nobility, but these alone do not lead to enlightenment, which reveals the illusory and transient nature of the phenomenal world and our free identity as immortal souls, part of the divine. The purpose of this booklet is to help and guide a spiritual seeker to awaken to the presence of his indwelling divinity. A person of awakened awareness of the spiritual effortlessly lives a little life of nobility, righteousness, and loving kindness. Once this paradigm shifts, shift of consciousness Once this paradigm shift of consciousness is accomplished, the confines of I and mind expand infinitely to encompass the whole of the universe. Such a realized soul feels that he has far greater responsibilities to shoulder than mere caring for his narrow physical self and related persons and things. As one climbs higher and higher on this spiritual ascent, one's sense of belonging expands accordingly, and finally, looking around as far as one can from the top of a hill, one discovers that he is one with all existence. Earlier, a person had to take care perhaps of his children, siblings, a few relatives, a few employees, some possessions, etc. But now these thousands of upon thousands of things and people around appear needing his personal care. In other words, as one's field of vision widens on climbing a high hill, so does the perspective of self on self realization. The tiny egocentric body confined sense of I-ness vanishes for good. Let us try to understand this concept through an analogy. Let us consider the air in a balloon as the limited self. Blowing air in this balloon expands it and it occupies more and more space till it bursts. The air in the balloon becomes part of the vast expanse of air surrounding the earth. In the same manner, progressive expansion of self identity ultimately leads to the realization that it was inseparably connected with all creation. It was the body consciousness, the balloons, which was creating the illusion of an isolated, independent existence of one's own. In a nutshell, this is the vision of self realization. This is the basic tenet of the super science of spirituality, which constitutes the core of the various religious faiths and mystic paths and over the world. In a nutshell, this is the core of all disciplines of spiritual practices, irrespective of the people, places, or varieties of worship. Once having a glimpse of the true self, the seeker can never return to the confines of the old narrow perspective of self. In common human life, in each moment, there is a lurking worry and fear of a possible disaster. Man is in desperate search of a perennial source of happiness, but he is seeking it outside of himself, in possessions, wealth, power, and relations. When one dying of thirst in a desert finds an oasis of cool water, would one ever think of returning to the wasteland of scorching sand? Yadgatavana nivarte tadham paramam mam, proclaim the divine teacher in Bhagavad Gita. It means having experienced the bliss of self-realization, who would like to come for suffering mundane worldly woes? Having reached the destination, the question of losing direction does not arise. Does one forget the way back to home after homecoming? Vices like lust, anger, greed, infatuation, and cravings for sensory pleasures keep man always entangled in the cobweb of misery. On account of the ever-changing nature of material world, one can never have lasting peace and happiness on this plane. Throughout life, man keeps on lamenting on loss, cravings for more and more of what he considers pleasant, and getting in frustrated on denial of his wishes. The attachment to the pleasant and repulsion from the unpleasant are two root causes of retrogression, which drag the being to birth in subhuman species of animal kingdom. Laws of science of spirituality state that in course of its progressive evolution, the soul of a being inhabits bodies of successively higher, more evolved species of biological kingdom, and birth as a human being is the culmination of this evolution. It is further stated that Indulgence in aforementioned animal traits sets the clock of progressive evolution backward. The methods prescribed in spiritual practices in various faiths are meant to rise above the pull of these beastly tendencies. In the Bhagavad Gita, human mind is personified as Arjun in the Battle of Mahabharata, which symbolizes the perpetual inner battle between the good and the evil within our own selves. He is exhorted by God incarnate Sri Krishna to fight against and annihilate his own intimate relatives' evil traits, personified as the Kauravas. In the following chapters of this booklet, simple exercises are suggested for elevating the level of consciousness of man to a superconscious state where he becomes totally free from degrading traits of worldly life. Self-realization endows the seeker with the celestial virtues of divinity. As mentioned earlier, progressive expansion of the ego-bound narrow self ultimately bursts the balloon of body consciousness, and the individual being attains an at one meant with the omnipresent Supreme Being. Some scepters may interpret this path of soul growth as the way of the recluse or the ascetic who wants nirvana, deliverance, or who desire to be detached from worldly life or altruistic pursuits. One may even argue that this sadhana is only for those who are interested in the benefits of life beyond death, whereas all efforts of a common man are focused on the pleasures of this world only. That most of the time of man in his daily routine is taken up by such things as a business, job, education, entertainment, etc., and he has little or no inclination or time to think and provide for life beyond death. It is natural to have such doubts since in today's world the confused mindset of man treats well-being of self in this world and in the worlds beyond death as two different pursuits, whereas factually these cannot be compartmentalized. What pertains to this world is also covertly related to the other. These are inseparable like two sides of the same coin. The subject matter of this writing does not permit dealing in detail with this misconception. Suffix is to say that the cultivation of self-awareness is the most efficacious method of success in practical life of this world as well. All progress in this world goes hand in hand with the progressive evolution of human consciousness. One who is endowed with the inner strength of soul has the capacity to succeed in all avenues of life. The simple and natural method of communion with God is in knowing one's true immortal self, appreciating dignity of human life, finding out the specific role of human species in the creation of God, and therefore start functioning without any ego-centered motive as the manager of his estate, whatever apart it has been entrusted to your care. There can be no more soul satisfying art of living than this. There should be no ambiguity in understanding this plain truth that there are two root causes of success or failure in any human endeavor. One, a correct appraisal of one's capabilities and shortcomings, and two, knowledge about availability of means and resources required to complete the assignment. In spite of being endowed with the best of intellect, one cannot arrive at the right decision in the absence of hard facts about these variables. Spiritual masters say, remember, the soul in you is indestructible. You are not a non-entity but a magnificent creation of God. Do not feel weak in any respect, nor Beg for anything. You are immensely powerful. There are no limitations to what you can do. The potentials with which you have appeared in this world can undoubtedly overcome all obstacles in your way to success. Your capabilities are more powerful than the obstructions to be overcome. Success and happiness are your birthrights. Wake up, identify your true self, assess your means and resources, and wisely go ahead towards the set goal. You will find that there is nothing that you aspire for is beyond your reach. You are the Kalpavriksha and Kamadhenu of heavens, which grant all wishes. You are success personified. Come forward and take charge of what is your due. The booklet tells you that you are not merely a body, nor like any other less evolved species on earth, but are manifestation of attributes of God. Body and mind are your tools. You are not a slave of your sensory organs. Animal-like habits cannot enslave you. The pollutants of thoughts cannot withstand your inner strength. In essence, a human being is an embodied soul with the body as an instrument. Understand this distinction clearly and unambiguously. When man regards the self as his body, the soul cannot use the body effectively. The distinction enables the soul to make use of the body as an instrument of self growth. This is the task before man. Any task can be successfully accomplished if there is clarity of vision and purpose. This is the yoga who perfects skill in works. Yoga karmesu Kausalam Gita. Diligently aspire to be such a yogi. The purpose of this writing is to motivate you to make your contributions to the real well-being of this world and the world beyond, leading you to the supreme goal. May God enlighten you. So I end the chapter and the video here. So thank you for watching this wonderful video. And this is the first video. I will give some 2 or 3 more videos continuing this topic of who am I. That is self-realization, or you can say self-enquiry. So thank you my dear friends for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar.